Welcome to the Low Carb MD Podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope. Nothing said on the Low Carb MD Podcast is medical advice. Please consult your own doctor before making any lifestyle changes.
Hello and welcome back to the Low Carb MD Podcast. Tro, we got a smart one today.
Oh, much smarter than us. And I'm so excited to have her. We actually, both of us met her on the cruise, and she was the absolute star. Her lecture was absolutely amazing. And she left such a positive impression on my wife and I. I said, we got to get her on the podcast. So right after the cruise, I reached out and finally our schedules aligned. And so I'm super excited to have Dr. Lucia Aronica with us. And if you've been living under a rock, she is the Stanford professor and Ph.D. who has worked very closely with the DIETFITS study, also set up the first, I believe, program in epigenetics at Stanford. And she's had a number of different papers published on nutrigenomics, genetics, diabetes, weight loss. And you may have seen her on the Netflix documentary. I think you made it on the Netflix documentary, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I think I did see you there. But I'm super excited to have you here. And unfortunately, Brian is going to lead most of this, but I can't wait to hear, you impart wisdom on us and impart all your knowledge on us.
Thank you so much for having me, Tro. It was a pleasure meeting you on the cruise, on the low carb cruise, and finally in person. I had met Brian before at some other low carb meetings, and I'm excited to share my insights with your audience.
Yeah, you helped me before the cruise. I'd never been on a cruise like that. And you're like, okay, we were in the waiting area and you're like, okay, here's what you have to do. Here's how it works. I'm like, okay, thanks. So it was fun. We had a blast. And so these guys get a lot of free advertising from us, Tro. We're nice people that way, but that was a fun time. That was really, really cool. So now we get to pick your brain. You can't, on the ship, you could hide from us a little bit because it was pretty big, but here, tell us how you got into what you're doing now and how your interest, what was your personal motivator for going into your career path that you're on right now?
Yeah, so as you can hear from my accent, I'm Italian. So I was born in Italy, Naples, and I always had a passion for food. Food, is a lot of things, right? It's, of course, nutrition, it's a necessity, it's a pleasure, it's a cultural symbol, and it's also a cement for social connections, especially in Italy. And then I decided to pursue studies in medical biotechnology. I started my university when the Human Genome Project was, the first draft was published, and it was just a very exciting time for the area of genomics. And after my university study, my master's, I pursued a program, a Ph.D. program in epigenetics. Now, it was at that time that then I connected the dots between my professional interest in genomics and epigenetics and food. Because epigenetics, and we can explain a little later what that means, but really provided a new perspective to frame food as information, as a powerful signals to our genes. And that really transformed my approach to food. Because, I think, and this is the message I'm trying to popularize and make mainstream. So to make people aware that every time they eat, they are really sending signals to their genes. And it's almost like an added layer to something we already know, that food, is important, that we are what we eat, but really knowing that actually we are talking to our genes when we eat, and we do have the power to potentially turn good genes on and bad genes off. I think it's powerful. And so this is how I connected the dots. At that time, during my PhD, I was doing basic research. So I'm a molecular biologist. I was in the lab working with the little cells, first protists, and then yeast cells during my postdoctoral studies at Oxford University. And then I finally decided to really apply epigenetics to nutrition when I moved to Stanford 10 years ago. And I was leading the epigenetic analysis of the DIETFITS study, the largest randomized clinical trial ever undertaken to compare a low carbohydrate and low fat diet. And then I created the first program at Stanford, professional program in epigenetics, and I'm still teaching diet and gene expression. So this is my story, and I just want to add my passion for nutrition and low carb nutrition on a personal side really started when I left Italy to pursue my doctorate study in Vienna, in Austria, in epigenetics. So at that time, of course, in Italy, we used to eat pasta almost every day, and I also did. But then when I moved to Austria, I really got into weightlifting, and then I also started to play with my diet. First, for just a bodybuilding perspective, I tried actually a ketogenic diet for definition, right? After a bulking phase, the ketogenic diet was actually popular in the 80s as a diet to cut and get shredded. And this is the way, I actually entered in the keto world. But by doing so, because I'm a scientist, I noticed something very interesting. So my triglycerides, which were in a healthy range of 90 milligram per deciliter, dropped to 35. And then my HDL, which was in a healthy range of 50, skyrocketed to 135 milligram per deciliter. And we know that the ratio of triglycerides to HDL is, I think, one of the most important lipid markers for health. So I was like, oh my goodness, I'm doing this crazy diet where I'm eating a lot of fat, and yet one of the main cardiovascular markers is improving, right? So I got so excited at that time, and this was really the beginning of my desire to combine epigenetics and low carb nutrition studies. And at that time, it was around the year 2007. The group at Stanford, led by Christopher Gardner, published the A to Z study, which is the study that the initial study that then from which stemmed the DIETFITS study. So the A to Z study was a study in 300 something women that tested, they were randomized to 4 different diets with different carbohydrate content, from Atkins A to Zone Z. And basically, they showed what I actually experienced with my ketogenic diet experiment. So the women randomized to the Atkins diet, the one with the highest fat and low carb content, experience lower triglycerides, higher HDL, greater weight loss. And I was like, oh, I want to be working for this group. And when they announced, Christopher Gardner announced the DIETFITS study, and which was a follow-up study of that A to Z study, but with more people, 609 subjects, both men and women, and they were planning to test all sorts of molecular markers from genetics, microbiome. I was like, at that time I was in Oxford, I was like, okay, I want to be part of this, and I'm doing epigenetics. So I just wrote an email to Christopher, and I told him, I am an epigenetics scientist in love with low-carb nutrition, and I would love to be part of this. I can lead your analysis. You are not planning to include epigenetics, but you should. And if you invite me, I will take care of this analysis. And Christopher told me, okay, when can I contact your referees? And I was like, oh my goodness, these American people really move fast. But it was, it was the start of a very, a happy and fulfilling phase of my life.
Just one question on that, because I'm curious, because I don't know the answer to this. Did your LDL go up like crazy too when you did this dietary change?
No, not so much. So many people ask me this question because with this high HDL, right, 135, many people think I'm a so-called high responder, right? But my HDL never skyrocketed, and it's
the LDL, right?
The
HDL skyrocketed.
No, yes, the LDL. So it's strange. I think it's there might be some genetic predisposition, but what is interesting is that I actually took a genetic test, and based on what we know so far, I'm actually predisposed to have low HDL. So genetically. So that's very interesting. I think it was a combination. This is my hypothesis. And, I think it was a combination of being very lean, doing especially weight bearing exercise with a lot of muscle, and we know that muscle works as a sugar sink even when we are at rest, right? So and then I think it was a combination of this, like exercise, right, type of exercise, being very lean, eating a low carb diet with also I had relatively high content in fiber. Many people think a low carb diet doesn't have, it's a low fiber diet. It depends. I was eating a lot of, all my carbohydrates were coming basically from green leafy vegetables and some cruciferous vegetables mostly. And so it was really actually, and because I was exercising, my carbohydrate threshold probably was higher. So actually I was eating very big portions of vegetables, right? Still being in ketosis because, I was burning like crazy, right? So I don't know whether that was part of the recipe, but I tell you, my HDL is still so high. Maybe it's 110 now, but I can easily find my blood results. So I could find them among hundreds because it's different. It's just my blood looks different, and I like it. So.
So you think that's an epigenetic change to getting the HDL to start firing up? Do you think that's epigenetic?
Oh, of course, epigenetics. Epigenetics always plays a role in most of our changes, right? When we change something, when we observe changes, usually there is an epigenetic change that goes with that. And even when we build muscle, we know that we are just basically turning on the muscle building genes in our muscles, and some of those genes even protect us from diabetes. Maybe it's a good time for me to just provide a very easy definition of epigenetics for your audience.
Perfect. Yes, please.
Yeah.
For Tro.
So epi prefix epi comes from the Greek language and means on the top, just like epidermis. So epigenetic marks are molecular switches that sit atop our DNA and can modulate gene expression up and down, just like a dimmer switch modulates the brightness of a light in a room. And unlike our genes, these epigenetic marks are flexible and dynamically remodeled by our lifestyle factors and environmental factors. Scientists call this the collection, the totality of these factors, the exposome. So all the things we are exposed to every day, including external factors like diet, exercise, pollutants, but also internal factors like it can be blood levels of HDL, LDL, stress, emotions. So all these things, our external and internal environment really talk with our genes. And now among all these factors, food, nutrition is the one that really can control, we have more control on. Because first of all, we eat every day, multiple times a day, and we really know a lot about. There are lots of studies on how nutrition can modify, turn genes on and on, both in animal studies and people. Now, in a nutshell, I call, this approach of thinking about food as information and using it to be healthier and live healthier longer, epi-nutrition, which is, again, eating with the awareness that we are actually communicating with our genes. And epi-nutrition, the foundation of epi-nutrition are epi-nutrients. So nutrients that really nurture our genes. These nutrients are vitamins that we already have been, known for years. There are some phytochemicals from plants, and they have been shown to really be essential for the proper functioning of our epigenome. So the epinutrients comprise methyl donors and epibioactives. Methyl donors are truly essential, the essential building block for methylation reactions, which are also necessary for epigenetic mechanisms, not only for epigenetic mechanisms, for lots of things in our body. And these include things like B12, folate, choline, betaine, and methionine. And in general, animal foods are the richest sources of these methyl donors. They're found both in animal and plant foods, but animal foods are the only bioavailable source of B12 and choline. As you know, B12 is found in many animal foods, especially in shellfish and meat and fish, whereas choline is found primarily in egg yolks and liver, also little fish and meat, choline is essential for epigenetic reactions, but also for acetylcholine in the brain. Now, it is so essential that actually we produce some choline. So it's a semi-essential nutrient. It looks like our body already produce about 30% of the choline we need. But it's very important. It's very important for our brain, our function. That's why it's recommended that especially pregnant women pay attention to their choline intake. One thing that I find very interesting is when we should always follow the recommendation for pregnant women, because it's almost like when it comes to be pregnant, and then everything becomes important, right? It's as if choline for us is not important, and it becomes important when you are pregnant. It's especially important when you are pregnant, right? But it's not that it's also important for our everyday life. And so it's very difficult to get choline from plant foods. It's it's found in small amounts in broccoli, nuts, but it's small amounts and not so bioavailable forms. So I always recommend my vegetarian and vegan friends to supplement with soy lecithin, which is a source of phosphatidylcholine. And can help like 1 or 2 tablespoons per day. And then we have the other categories of epinutrients are epibioactives. And those are found primarily in plants because are phytochemicals. But with the exception of omega-3 fatty acids, which are found primarily in fish and marine sources. So what are these? Why are they different from methyl donors? Methyl donors provide the building blocks for methylation reactions for epigenetics. The epibioactives are more regulating the activity of epigenetic enzymes, that write epigenetic modifications on our genes, or erasers that erase that modification. So they help a little bit, regulate epigenetic activities, and it turns out that they, especially the phytochemicals, they act a little bit like, is a stressor, a positive stressor. What I mean by that is that, there are some subtypes of stresses and poisons that can be good for us. Like even exercise is an example of this. Like exercise is a stress. Actually, when we exercise, we destroy muscle, right? And then that stress activate epigenetically a molecular pathway that then of self-defense and regeneration that then make us stronger, because then you build more muscle, right? That is an example of a stress that can be positive in a certain dose, right? If you overtrain, of course, it's going to be bad, right? And it's also fasting is the same. Fasting is a stress and is going to activate self-defense and regeneration pathways. The same thing are these phytochemicals. There are many people, they say they are anti-nutrients, they are bad for us. And it's true, right? It's a foreign substance. But when used in the therapeutic dose, what they do is that they behave as stressors. So they activate these self-defense pathways. They make us stronger. This is called hormesis. Is
like a sauna or a cold plunge, things like that, where it's an acute stress and you get a relaxation burst.
Yeah, thank you for providing. Yeah, except that's the same. It's called hormesis. So it's almost like hormesis is this adaptation to a stressor that make us stronger. And of course, the dose is important, right? You don't want to stay in the cold plunge for hours. You don't want to eat to, even with these phytochemicals, there are cases of intoxication from the juices, especially, the juices made of broccoli and things. You don't want to do that. I'm just saying that there are some phytochemicals and and I know that this is not the carnivore community may not like it, but that's actually it's almost I'm telling them it's true that they are poisonous in a way, right? They are a stressor. These phytochemicals are a stressor, but can activate this self-defense pathway, and actually they're called epibioactive and regulate these genes. So. And incorporating these phytochemicals in a low carb diet is very easy, because actually they're found primarily in low carb veggies, right? Broccoli, for example, is a source of sulforaphane, an epibioactive that really turns on anti-inflammatory genes and antioxidant genes in our cells. I actually love sulforaphane because it turns upside down our concept of that we need always to eat, to consume antioxidants. Yeah. Antioxidants like vitamin C are great for us, but they are, their half-life is only 2-3 hours, a couple of hours in our body. So we need to consume always these antioxidants, whereas sulforaphane is not an antioxidant itself, but it turns on antioxidant genes and pathways in our body, our own endogenous antioxidant pathways. You may know, glutathione, and it turns off the inflammatory pathways like NF-κB, for example. So it's a smarter antioxidant, and it's all about epigenetics, and then other epibiotics are found even in things like coffee, dark chocolate. You can have some on low carb. I have the 100% olive oil. Oh my goodness, olive oil for me. Maybe because I'm Italian, I still prefer olive oil to other fats. I know, butter is also great. It contains butyrate, which is another epinutrient, but I prefer olive oil with a high polyphenol count. And actually, even ketones, so the beta-hydroxybutyrate, the ketone, the primary ketone in our blood, works as an epibioactive. Why? Because it modulates the activity of so-called HDACs. Maybe you have heard about that. What are these HDACs? Are eraser enzymes, epigenetic eraser enzymes, because they are histone deacetylases. So this means are enzymes that erase acetyl groups from histones, which are the protein that pack the DNA inside the cell nucleus, regulating which genes are open and so on or off. So basically, we know that ketones are an epigenetic regulator, and actually they work as an epibioactive, and they are produced by our body when we lower our carbohydrate intake to a certain threshold that varies from person to person. So this is another example of actually an epigenetic effect of our food, that it's not tighten to a specific nutrient, but more to an overall dietary pattern.
I meant to ask you when you were talking about the first pathway of when people have MTHFR deficiency, is that epigenetic, or you're genetically
That's a great question, and one of the most frequent that I receive. Okay, that is a nutrigenetic variant. Now, let me provide a definition first, and then I will comment on MTHFR. So, the study of how diet and DNA interact with each other is called nutrigenomics. And it comprises nutrigenetics, which is the science of how genes like MTHFR affect our response to nutrients and foods. And on the other hand, there is nutri-epigenetics or nutritional epigenetics, which is the opposite. So the science of how the food we eat can change the expression of genes. And nutrigenetics and nutri-epigenetics work hand in hand in nutrigenomics. Now, we have been talking before with epinutrition. Epinutrition is the practice of nutritional epigenetics, right? We have been talking about how all these things we eat from plants and plant and animal foods can shape our gene expression, potentially turning on good genes and turning off bad genes. This is nutri-epigenetics. Now, your question is about nutrigenetics. Yeah, that is also an important component to personalize our diet. For example, in the case of the MTHFR variation, we know that people, so we all carry 2 copies of each gene. And for this MTHFR gene, so the role of this gene is to activate the folate we eat from spinach, liver, in an active form that our body can use, right? So there are some genetic variations in this gene where the gene that decrease the gene activity to 30% if you carry only 1 copy, up to 70% if you carry 2 copies of the variant, let's say the defective variant, the slower variant. So in this case, this means that you can activate less folate from the spinach you eat. And so the practical advice in this case is, first of all, try to eat more of the folate from your diet from natural sources. And secondly, you can consider supplementing with a folate form that is already activated, so is methylated. This is the reaction that activates the folate we eat. So
is it true that if someone's taking a folic acid supplements or a folate and they have MTHFR, that makes things worse for them if they're not taking the methylated form? And also, is there a problem if someone doesn't have MTHFR deficiency if they're taking a methylated, folate? Is there ever an issue with that, or does it really matter?
That's a great question. That's a controversy. So I can tell you where the facts, what we know, and my opinion. Right? That's controversial. So I think first of all, just to explain, there is a difference between folic acid and methylated folate, right? Folic acid is the synthetic form of folate, and actually it doesn't exist in our body. It was introduced in the 1980s, where the fortification of food with the folic acid was mandatory, and it really helped with the cut down cases of spina bifida, which is a neural tube defect, congenital, that is caused by folate deficiency during pregnancy. So, just to reply to your question, in case this is already demonstrated, folic acid is effective in cases of deficiencies, right? Now the question is, however, I believe if I have the option to choose between folic acid and the methylated folate, which is the bioidentical form, I, for myself, prefer to go with the bioidentical form for many reasons, especially if I am an MTHFR carrier. Considering that I cannot activate the folic acid effectively, I would prefer going with the methylated forms. Now, there are some studies raising concerns that if you are an MTHFR carrier and take folic acid, you are actually going to accumulate the unmetabolized folic acid at higher level, and this can have detrimental consequences for at the cellular level and potentially at the systemic level. Overall, I think if you have the option, I would always prefer to have a methylated supplement. That said, if that is not an option for you, if it's too expensive, I think folic acid is the next best thing. If you're going to be deficient, is still going to save your child from having spina bifida. So this is my take, and it's a controversial topic, but I do prefer, in general, going for the bioidentical forms of a supplement if available.
Any concerns, like for someone listening that's on a carnivore diet? Would you say, yeah, you're probably better off adding a little fiber into that, or polyphenols to your diet? I do look at the gut microbiome a lot, and I've been really intrigued by what I'm finding. One thing that I think I think is very interesting, at least to me, is I've had several people on a carnivore diet whose LDL goes up like crazy, and also their triglycerides are going up, which is the opposite of what you saw. And in the last 2 weeks, I've checked 4 people that had this pattern. None of them are lean mass hyperresponders, by the way, and they all have leaky gut. Zonulin's super high. They got inflammation in their gut, and their gut microbiome is a mess. And this is before they went on a strict carnivore diet type thing. So I'd be interested to see what your opinion is, if what you think about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, I think the carnivore diet can be therapeutic in many cases, and you are an expert on that. You can tell me all the applications for it. And so one also needs to always compare the risk and benefits, right? For sure, there are several benefits. Now, there are some, I do believe that there are some strategies, some benefits of incorporating some phytochemicals and potentially fiber, of course, in a personalized way, because that many people who embrace a carnivore lifestyle also they may have some gut issues and they may not tolerate well fiber. This may be the first reason why they are going we are embracing a carnivore lifestyle. So I think there is a place for phytochemicals and fiber, but it needs to be implemented in a well-thought protocol, step by step. Now, the low-hanging fruit as phytochemicals to introduce in a diet for a carnivore, olive oil, right? Full of these epibiotics. There are plants, but they are very powerful. Coffee, spices. If you like your meat with spices, even pepper is an epibiotic. Curcumin. There are lots. You don't necessarily need to eat vegetables, although I think a little fiber from vegetables, if you tolerate it, might be good. Another source of fiber is even, for example, we were talking about chocolate, right? I love chocolate, and I actually eat raw cacao beans. I don't know if, again, some carnivore people may not tolerate that, but that is a way to have chocolate with fiber, because I eat the whole thing. You can experiment with these little things that provide some fiber, and then go from there. You can also consider having.
Is the powdered cacao, is that going to have fiber, or are you better off doing the whole bean?
Yeah, I'm actually showing it to you because
Very
it's
cool.
always always on my maybe you don't see it.
I see it. Yeah.
So it's I have it like basically 2-3 times a day, and I have that's why it's always here. It's just almost I end my meal with this, and I roast them in the oven, and the whole house smells like low carb muffin. It's nothing, and there's a lot of fiber there. So I think there is a place to experiment with these little things. You can also consider having some psyllium husk in the water. Again, it's a fiber, it's a soluble fiber. So usually people with gastrointestinal problems and IBS, they tend to tolerate better the soluble fiber, like for example psyllium husk. Soluble fibers basically dissolved in water. And it's very beneficial for your microbiome because it feeds your microbiome, and then your microbiome produces all these postbiotics, like for example short chain fatty acids that really promote overall gut health. So in general, soluble fiber is better tolerated. Most veggies are a mix of insoluble and soluble fiber. In general, maybe psyllium husk may be a good way to experiment with that, because you can start very small, right? Take it like a teaspoon a day with lots of water, and then go from there. I don't know whether do you recommend it to your patients?
Really, now that I'm looking at this leaky gut issue, I'm thinking, it's worthwhile looking at how do we strengthen the gut with butyrate, like you're talking about, ketones, MCT oil, maybe, that may be helpful. It's I'm just this is new to me looking at this part of it, because I know generally when I see someone go on like a standard American diet to a carnivore diet, their triglycerides drop like crazy, their HDL goes up. LDL is I don't know what it's going to do. It just depends on the person.
Yeah.
But if their triglycerides start going up and their LDL goes up like crazy and they're not super lean, I really start thinking about leaky gut. Like, are they absorbing just all that right across their gut lining where they have an issue? So fixing the gut lining, maybe, adding in some fiber. So there's some like theoretical, I think it's more than theoretical, but if you starve your gut microbiome for too much of sugar, Akkermansia is known for starting to eat the mucus layer of the colon, and you start to eat that. Now you start getting into problems. So it may be short term, you get better and then you get worse. So I think it's just depending on how the patients respond. There's a ton of people like Sean Baker who does all carnivore and he's fine. So okay, keep doing your thing, right? If your numbers are good and you feel great, I don't care.
Exactly. There is a lot of individuality, and this being a physician dealing with patients. So I personally believe that the microbiome is an important player in our health. It seems to affect really not only our gut health, but also even our brain health, immune function. And I think there are ways to maintain and nurture a good microbiome, even with a carnivore or a semi-carnivore diet. You can again incorporate these little things that are from plants, starting from olive oil to coffee. Even those are plant foods, whether you like it or not. And then add some psyllium husk. Another thing that will be great if you really want to keep your vegetable intake as low as possible, but have the greatest benefit for your microbiome, I would go with fermented foods. Sauerkraut, because then you get the fiber, you get the probiotics, so the bacteria. You get the postbiotics because there are actually short chain fatty acids right there. Right, there are lots of things, and even things like apple cider vinegar. So actually, with the mother, that contains some short chain fatty acids, right? I'm not saying that this is the panacea. I know that if you go online, it looks like apple cider vinegar is the cure for all diseases. I'm not saying that, but I think it's another nice addition to your diet if you are carnivore, to have some more fiber and probiotics right there.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I was looking at, there's a couple studies out actually that looked at Adigan. They weren't even using apple cider vinegar. They were using red wine vinegar in college students. And they showed that their depression rates, stress rates, all these things got better just by taking a shot of this. And they think it has to do with the depleted gut microbiome. And some just don't make acetic acid. And if you're missing that, it's really helpful. If you're not missing it, probably doesn't make much of a difference. Like you said, it's so individualized. Like what works for someone may not work for you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
How about the effect of stress on all this stuff? Stress and not sleeping and all this. What like from an epigenetic standpoint?
Yeah, it's huge. It's less well studied, especially in the context of clinical trials. But there are lots of association studies linking stress and lack of sleep to epigenetic changes. We have really some mechanistic studies that really shows us what happens behind the scenes of epigenetics when you are stressed from animal studies. For example, a study in mice, a very famous study that showed that when even receiving nurturing behaviors from a mother are really sending calming signals that wire a child's brain to tolerate better stress later in life. In contrast, lack of that nurturing signals, specifically in this case, the experiment was with mice that were licking their progeny, or they were just leaving them alone, right? So lack of licking behavior from the mother was turning on some stress response pathway in the brain of children that so that when they grew up, they were more prone to anxiety. So this is really like just saying that probably what we know is that stress in general, but even social connections, are really talking directly to our brain, activating, turning on or off genes that then affect our predisposition to have anxiety in life. So
that storage, metabolic derangement, a lot of that, because I noticed that, it's funny when my patients go to Italy, maybe it's just the Italians are so nice, but when we monitor their CGMs, even though they're having pasta and bread and stuff they normally wouldn't have here, sugars look great. They come back and they go, I lost 3 pounds. Probably they're hiking and exercising more, but a lot. I just had a patient come back from India. And he was there and he had naan bread and rice and he was staying with people. So they made dessert. So he had it and he typically doesn't do that. And he comes back and said, I lost 4 pounds. He said, I didn't exercise more for sure. So it may have to do with I'd be curious too, how much that has to do with the food quality with GMO foods or decreasing your stress. Because he said, when I was there, I wasn't worried about picking up the kids from school and going to work and being here and doing all this stuff. He said, I was just whatever was happening for the day, just being a more mellow, calm.
Yeah, I think there is a lot going on there, right? It's a little the food, the quality of the food, them being on holiday or in other settings. But it's true that in Italy, I don't know, when I go back there, it's almost like, I always say it's almost like breathing more relaxation in the air. It's almost like you are there, you feel it. You don't have to So here, for example, I see lots of people meditate or relax. In Italy, nobody does it. It's almost like a built-in mechanism. It's when you walk in the streets, there's something. It's
a different vibe and a feeling, or people aren't rushing in a hurry and have to be here and get out of my way type thing, like New York City would be. Like when you're I was in Germany, we went out to dinner and years ago, but I'm thinking, should we get going? They go, oh no, the table's yours for the night. Like you don't have to hurry, just relax, enjoy, have a good time. Yeah. So it's like, wow, it's a different mindset. Yeah.
So this is just to say, as you are pointing out, not only nutrition, but the approach to wellness really requires, a multimodal approach. And I actually call this epi wellness. It's a holistic approach that it's a lifestyle medicine approach through the lens of epigenetics. And I think the most important pillars of epi wellness are nutrition, exercise, stress management, sleep, social connections, and even cognitive engagement, right? The working on the good stress, right? The good stress for your mind. I think all these things really play well together. I want to provide an example of how important it is attitude to life to your audience. Everyone who follows me knows I love my mom. It's just like a typical Italian. She's 84 years old. And when you talk with my mom, even if you don't understand Italian, you will feel instantly in a good mood. She's happy, vivacious. It's just like sweet. Oh my goodness. It's just like, she's not in the greatest shape in terms of, if you look at her blood biomarkers, yes, the lipids are okay. She has high blood pressure. She had multiple transient ischemic attacks that if you look at her brain, you will see a lot of dead areas, right? And then you look at her, and really, sometimes I feel I have no energy, and then I call my mom. She's just the poster child of how attitude to life is so important. She's, I don't know, I think is very much underrated. I don't know how to, if this is where it's difficult to give an advice how to develop that attitude. I think
that's a huge one, right? Like, I don't know if you've seen the information on Roseto, Pennsylvania, but a bunch of Italian immigrants,
yes,
right?
Yes,
their cholesterol was high. They smoked and they drank and they did, but they had tons of social connection. Grandma and grandpa lived in the house. They played with the grandkids, and there's something to that. Like, I think that's something that we just don't really put enough notice on. It's like, okay, relax a little bit, go have fun, like you're saying. When the baby's bonded with mom, the oxytocin goes up, the stress hormones come down, because I see so many people in this sympathetic overdrive all the time, so they're always stressed and worried, and they can't just breathe. You're saying, they don't have to go meditate because they're relaxed most of the time anyways.
Yeah, I think, I don't know how to develop that. I'm sure that there are some approaches, and probably, exercising gratitude every day. At the beginning, you need a little, if you're not already overly positive, you will need to start, actively and consciously cultivating that approach. And there are many frameworks, exercising gratitude. And then it will be almost like natural, a second nature. And I think it's very important. Yeah. So.
Yeah, super important, because I know you're always upbeat and happy, and you enjoy what you're doing, and you have a passion for what you're doing.
Oh, yes.
There's something to that. Some people are going to work every day going, oh gosh, I got to go deal with my boss again, and I have to get yelled at. And it's so hard for people. People don't realize the effect of that, So I would love to ask you, since we have you here, what would you tell someone who's struggling? They're like, look, I tried keto diet, I tried vegan diet, nothing works. What would you tell that person? Like, What would you say the low hanging fruit to work on? Is it like life stress or sleep or?
Yeah, I think first of all, in terms of nutrition, if it just focusing on unprocessed food is the first step, right? Because if you are going to do that, first of all, you're going automatically to eat a lower carbohydrate diet. I don't care even if you eat, fruits or other things. I mean, compared to a processed food diet with muffins and bread, pizza, pasta, you're going to eat a lower carbohydrate diet. So I'm okay with that. Try not to really think too much in terms of diets, but more like principles, right? No processed food. So why should I be eating lots of processed food, including pasta and bread is processed, right? So minimize that and really try to prioritize protein. Have some protein at each meal, 30 to 40 grams. For most people, including both animal foods and little plants at each meal, is useful. Try really to choose. Take some time to choose some food you love, and they are very nutrient dense and delicious. Because you need to bring back pleasure in what you are eating in order to make it sustainable and love it. I love the food I eat. That's why I stick to my diet. I will never change it. Even if I have the choice, I really prefer a piece of salmon, juicy salmon, to a pizza. I really do. So it's not like I need the cheat day. I don't want that. So I think my advice is for the nutrition piece, try not to overcomplicate, think in terms of principles, no processed food, and you will already lower your carb intake, and bring back pleasure try to find a way to come at pleasure, redefine it, because if you have been consuming processed food all your life, your brain thinks that is pleasurable. But believe me, you can retrain your brain. And if you start to eat unprocessed food, you will develop a new taste and a new sense of pleasure. It takes some time. Like anything, every time you learn something new, it takes repetitions and time. So this is the first thing, time and principles. I think I'm frozen, right? Okay.
Yeah, but your voice is perfect. So it's
okay. I'm okay. Then I keep on talking, although I'm frozen a little. Looking.
I know it's funny. One time I was interviewing Professor Noakes, and he froze, and I thought he was like getting upset with what I was saying. I was like, "Is that okay? What I'm saying?" And I realized he was frozen. I was like, "Oh, good, he's frozen. He's not mad at me."
And then the other pieces, of course, never neglect too much the other pieces. Like especially look at the exercise, sleep, social connections, cognitive engagement, and think what is my weakest link? Where is the area where I need to really improve? And I think and then tackle that first, because usually is your weakest link that really is hindering progress.
Great advice, because that was for me. When I met with Ben Bickman, I said, Ben, look, if I want to live a long life, what do I have to do? He goes, Brian, there's 5 things you could do, right? Number 1, don't be stressed and tense all day. I'm like, I don't like your rules so far, Ben. Number 2, get enough sleep. And at that time I was working 18-hour days and sleeping 4 or 5 hours. I'm like, I don't like your rules. I'm 0 for 2. He goes, that's why you guys die. The doctors die before everyone else. And then 3 was exercise regularly, eat real food, and don't smoke or drink to excess. He goes, everything else, luck of the draw. And that's exactly what you're saying. You're saying the same things like, hey, go live the Mediterranean lifestyle, not necessarily just the diet, right? Go and relax and don't be stressed and tense and bitter with the world, and have some gratitude and be nice to people around you and all those kind of things.
Exactly. So, yeah, I hope your audience is inspired, and I also, I'm very happy to be today here because I'm really recently I have refined my mission, and I think I want to empower people to use epigenetics almost as a motivational tool, because some people are, motivated knowing that they can outsmart their genes with science. It can be a powerful motivation to actually stick to your habits, right? Many people think, I have this MTHFR variant, or, I'm predisposed to be diabetic, or there's nothing I can do. And basically what I'm trying to do with my work is really tell them, look, that's not the case. Really, your lifestyle is always a diet over DNA, and you can outsmart your genes with the science of epigenetics. And so I actually started a YouTube series just last month called Outsmart Your Genes with Science. So I would like to invite your audience to follow me.
I was going to ask you, how do people connect with you and contact you?
So I have, I'm active mostly on YouTube and Instagram. So on Instagram, you will see I have a mix, I mix English posts with Italian posts, but be sure I will always have an English version and an Italian one. So don't feel, I am nurturing my English audience. And then for my YouTube channel, I have a YouTube channel in English only and one in Italian only. So maybe I can share the links with you, or you just search for me on YouTube and you will find me there. I also have in my link in bio in Instagram and on YouTube a list of top epigenetic foods that you can download. Of course, those are there are no superfoods, but I have selected foods that are, really, if you include all of them in your diet, you will be better off. And for each food, I have highlighted one epinutrient. So, you can also educate yourself about, epinutrition, epinutrients, why it is important. And there is a variety of, you will find both animal and plant foods on that list.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us. And we'll put all these links in the show notes for people. And thanks for all you do. And I don't know if you heard too, but Anna Vocina has a cookbook in Italian, right? Italian cookbook. I'm like, man, my Italian friends are like, forget it, I'm not doing low carb. Forget it, I'm not doing it. I have to have my pasta. Then, so that kind of opens the door from what you're talking about too. It's like really eat real food and enjoy your life and laugh and enjoy that company that you have.
Oh, yes. Yes. Always with a smile. Also, my mom says, always a smile. Smile is the secret to, for everything.
Yeah, it's contagious too. Like if you smile at people on the street, they'll usually smile back to you. And then if not, they're probably having a bad day and other things that we don't know about. But be nice to people. You have so much great advice. So thank you so much for joining us. And sorry, Tro had to ditch out early. He had patients, and now I have to go to work too. So go enjoy your weekend. And thank you so much for joining us. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye. Ciao.
Ciao.
If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us on Patreon by going to lowcarbmd.com.